Hello everyone, I'm Jackie O'Kelly, one of the family support consultants from Contact. I'm going to be delivering this Money Matters session today, which I hope you all find useful. So welcome everybody. First of all, just a little bit of information about Contact. Contact is the charity for families with disabled children or children with additional needs. And we support families with the best possible guidance and information, try to bring families together to support each other. And we help families to campaign, volunteer and fundraise to improve the life for themselves as well as others. We're the largest UK charity supporting children with additional needs, just so you know that. So who do we support? We provide advice, information and support to families of all children with additional needs or disabled children and young people from 0 to 25 years, and that's either with or without a diagnosis. So it's important that you as parents know that and can tell other parents. It doesn't matter, it's not an issue if your child has not actually received a formal diagnosis. If your child has got difficulties, then Contact is here to support you. And we support children with all types of conditions, long-term medical conditions like cerebral palsy, very rare conditions, might only be 2 or 3 children with that particular condition in the world, physical and learning disability, behaviour problems, life-limiting conditions like cancer, as well as mental health issues as well. The best way to find out about what Contact does and what it can offer is to look at the website, okay? There's loads of information on there, and we have information on every aspect of bringing up a child with additional needs. So it could be benefits like this talk, it could be education, it could be help from social services in terms of social care, getting a short break, what have you, education. So it's any aspect of bringing up a child with additional needs. The website's fairly easy to navigate round. Everything's grouped nicely together under different headings. So you should be okay to get to the information that you actually need. We've also got the helpline, which is probably the best starting point if you prefer to talk to somebody rather than have to look at a website and navigate around that. We've got the helpline, which is free, okay, Monday to Friday. And we've got on there helpline specialists who can actually talk to you about anything to do with bringing up a child with additional needs. Useful to know as well, if you ring the helpline and press option 1, you'll get to speak to educational specialists. So if you've got any issues at all about your child's education, and that can be preschool, nursery, preschool groups, if you actually ring that helpline number on the screen, press option 1 and you'll get to talk to an educational specialist. And it could be about anything that you're experiencing some difficulties with. It may be that your child is being excluded from nursery or school because of their behaviour issues. It could be that you're trying to get extra support and you don't know what the responsibility is of the nursery or the local education authority. So just be aware of that service, really valuable. Also, if you have got a complicated benefit query, we've also got benefits specialists, welfare benefits specialists. Only a couple, but we have got 2 excellent benefit specialists. I think that's 2. You can't unfortunately get through to them straight away. You can't just ring a separate number to speak to one. If you ring the helpline, put your benefit or money query to them. If they can help you, great, they will do, or they'll signpost you to a good local resource. If they think it's more complicated, what they'll do is book you a callback appointment with one of the welfare benefit specialists. So just be aware of that facility. Not many organisations offer that. And that's really important to know that for the purposes of this talk. The sorts of queries they deal with are a little bit more complex. It's not just where do I get a form to apply for disability living allowance. It is, you know, my child has been refused the high rate of disability living allowance. I don't know whether to challenge the decision. We've got reports from these people, but they don't seem to be backing up what I'm saying. So the query has to be a little bit more complicated. If you actually go on the website, you'll see all the information that we've got on there. We've got also some very useful podcasts, which are useful to listen to. A lot of those are on the subject of benefits. We've got one on carers allowance. We've got one on disability living allowance. and another money matter sort of headings. So just have a listen to the podcast. They're only sort of 4 or 5 minutes long, but that might be enough just to give you the information that you need. Okay, and we've got our online communities, which I know all charities have. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Just be aware we've got live chat on the website as well. So if you as a parent are anxious about speaking on the phone, you get a little bit worked up at the thought of having to speak to somebody you're not familiar with, just be aware we've got live chat, so you can type your message that will get through to the helpline. So that's really useful to know about as well. The best way to keep up to date with what is going on in the additional needs world is to sign up to our What's New newsletter, which is on the screen. Okay, if you sign up to that, you'll get that sent through every time there's something new to know about. I think it comes out monthly, but if there's a change to a benefit rule, and there was lots of changes during COVID that parents needed to be aware of, then it will be included in that newsletter. If you just look at the headings of the newsletter, see what you want to find out about, and just go straight to that bit of the newsletter, that's probably a really good way of keeping up to date with what information's out there. Just be aware as well, we've got Fledglings, that's an online shop that actually sells products that aren't readily available on the market to meet the additional needs of somebody with a disability. Products, just to give you a few examples, if your child has got continence problems, but they want to go swimming, they've got continence swimming products on that website. Or if your child needs special sensory equipment to feed their sensory needs, special pens, writing equipment. So look at the Fledglings part of our website as well. Just be aware that the helpline is free, so you don't have to worry about paying for the call. Also, listening ear service, be aware of that. That's a one-to-one callback service where one of us family support consultants will call you back at a time that suits you. You book your time and we can talk to you about whatever issue you want to. It could just be emotional support you're after. It could be you want to discuss your child's educational difficulties. It could be that you're having problems with getting respite care. So just be aware of the listening ear service. You'll find details of that on the website as well. So going straight on to the Money Matters presentation, which is what we're here to listen to today. What I'm going to cover and the aims of this session is to know how to maximise your finances, just to make sure you're getting everything that is out there that you might be able to get to claim, to understand what you might be entitled to understand the main benefits for disabled children and young people, to know where to get support, because it's all very well knowing these things, it's knowing, you know, there's this benefit you can apply for, but often the problem is getting help to complete forms and not knowing what information to put on forms. And just to give you a little bit of an update on current changes in guidance, on that last point, I would say the best way to keep updated on any changes is to sign up to that newsletter called the What's New e-newsletter, which Contact produces. It will get emailed through to your inbox monthly, I think it is, and you'll see on that any changes you need to be aware of. An example is in Scotland now, disability living allowance for children up to 18 has been changed to another type of benefit. So if you live in Scotland, you really need to know that. So that's just an example of the sort of information that will be included in the What's New e-newsletter. So the main benefits I'm going to cover in this talk are disability living allowance, often shortened to DLA. I know a lot of parents are, you know, embarrassed to say, what does DLA actually mean? I'll also mention personal independence payment, but I won't talk a great deal because that is the benefit that you claim when your child reaches 16, or if you live in Scotland, 18. Okay, but I'll just mention it for a couple of reasons in this talk. I'll also touch on carers allowance, tax credits, universal credit, and help with council tax. The reason I've mentioned that second benefit, personal independence payment, which is often shortened to PIP, when your child reaches 16 or 18 in Scotland, you actually stop being able to get disability living allowance. You have to claim personal independence payment. Even if your child has got a lifelong disability or condition, for example, they may have Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, which isn't just going to go away at the age of 16. even if your child has got that type of disability, you'll still have to claim personal independence payment, which is a different benefit completely. The only reason I mention it in this talk is it's very useful to keep hold of your early letters and diagnosis letters and reports for when you're claiming PIP at the age of 16, which I know sounds a long way off, because when you claim PIP, you have to sort of give a description of your child's difficulties, and diagnosis letters are extremely useful source of information. You know, you can justify then why your child might be having difficulties at 16 with an activity because of, for example, their sensory needs, which stop them being able to go out without somebody supporting them, because they can't tolerate noise and busy, crowded environments because of their sensory issues, which were diagnosed when my child was the age of 4, and you've got your diagnosis or report to actually show that. So that's the only reason I mentioned personal independence payment. It's for older children from the age of 16 upwards, but I say it because I don't want you just to actually think, well, I won't need this diagnosis letter ever again. I'm getting DLA now. I can just shred that. It's not needed. Do keep those important letters. So just some facts. Families miss out on claiming benefits they're entitled to, much more likely to have reduced finances, and often find out about financial support by chance. Overhearing somebody in the queue at the chemist, somebody's got a child with additional needs, you hear that they've put in, you know, a claim for DLA and they've been awarded it, and that's meant that they've got more of their other benefits. They've been increased because their child now gets DLA. We hear that all too often. Nobody comes knocking on your door to say, by the way, did you know that you can claim this, this, and this is where you get the form from, and this is how you apply for it. And the reasons people don't claim benefits are, A, they don't know about them. Okay, like I said, people don't come and knock on your door and tell you about these things. It may be that your child hasn't got a diagnosis, and a lot of parents wrongly think that they can't claim disability living allowance if their child hasn't got a formal diagnosis. And that's wrong. Obviously, your child, you want to claim because your child's got additional needs and you have to give them extra help during the day and perhaps during the night. It doesn't matter that doctors and people can't work out why your child has got those difficulties. They haven't got to that stage yet of making a formal diagnosis, but they all know that your child is exhibiting difficulties. You know, when they go to nursery, they can't sit still for very long. They tend to be quite disruptive. Their motor skills, their movement skills are quite shaky, and they're a bit clumsy. They tend to trip over a lot. People don't know why that is, but your child obviously has got difficulties. That means that you might be eligible for disability living allowance, and you should put in a claim for it. It will mean that you will need people to back you up when you make that claim. Okay, we don't know why your child's got difficulties, but the important thing is that people can actually back up, you know, perhaps nursery, or if your child goes to something like Beavers or Rainbows, if you can get them to back up these difficulties as well, that will help your DLA application. A lot of parents assume they're not entitled to any. For example, if they work, they think, well, I can't claim that benefit because I earn too much money, or my partner or husband or whoever earns too much money. And that also is incorrect. With disability living allowance and personal independence payment, it doesn't matter how much money you earn or how many savings you've got. It's not means tested at all. So you can still put in your claim, even though you're working, you're earning, you've got savings. Some parents are given wrong information. For example, because your child's not got a diagnosis, you can't put in that claim yet. That's wrong. Like I've just said earlier, you don't need a diagnosis to claim disability living allowance. One of the biggest reasons parents don't actually apply for things is the forms are just too difficult to complete. They're not 2 or 3 pages long, they're sort of 42 pages long, which is very overwhelming when your day is taken up trying to help your child. Perhaps they're not sleeping, you're battling trying to get through to all these professionals to get help, you're trying to get your child assessed. The thought of sitting down at the end of the day, having done all that, to fill in a 42-page document is too overwhelming for a lot of people. And that's another factor that puts people off claiming. And some parents just don't see their child as having additional needs because they're so used to doing things in the way their child likes to do things, it's become normalised. It's become normal. Every time your child wants to go out, you know they have to go through 2 or 3 rituals before they will agree for you to open the door. You know, they will have to, you know, put their coat on, they will have to go up and down the stairs, they will have to see a picture of where they're going, then they will agree to open the front door and then go into the car. And if any of those rituals are upset, or if they don't happen in the right order or don't happen, then they will refuse to go out. But that's become so normal, you just do that. You go through those rituals thinking it's quite normal, when really you're giving your child an awful lot of help and support to get them to agree to go out. And that immediately might mean that you're eligible for disability leave allowance, okay, which I'll explain more about when we come to that slide. So DLA is there, I shorten it to DLA, but that's what it is, disability leave allowance, the main benefit to apply for a child with additional needs from 0 up to 16 or 18 if you live in Scotland, which I know you don't. It's there to help meet the costs of disability. Nobody can tell you how to spend your DLA. So if you want to spend it indirectly on helping you as your child's carer, for example, getting a cleaner in because your child takes up all your time, they don't sleep, you have no energy, everything's getting on top of you. If you want to use your DLA to employ a cleaner to try and go through the house, give it a deep clean so you don't need to do it for another year, or get on top of your ironing, that will free up your energy and headspace to deal with your child, giving them more quality time with you. So your DLA is there to meet the cost of disability in any shape or form. You don't need a diagnosis to claim DLA, but as I've said earlier, your child's got to have some sort of difficulties, which means they need more help in doing the tasks that are in the DLA form. Okay, I'll explain more about the activities in the next couple of slides. But what you will need is people to back up those difficulties. So it's not just you saying, my child needs extra help to brush their teeth, to wash themselves, to cooperate and get in the shower, to actually sit down and lift the spoon rather than eat with their fingers. My child needs help with all of those things. You will need somebody, perhaps health visitor, nursery, somebody to actually say, yes, the child is exhibiting these difficulties as well. I've also said earlier, it's not means tested, which means it doesn't matter whether you're earning or how many savings or how many properties you own or stocks and shares, it doesn't matter, not means tested. So that's something that shouldn't put you off applying for DLA. If you do get DLA, what will happen is you will get more added onto other means tested benefits. Okay, so if you get other benefits like universal credit or working tax credits or child tax credits, what will happen is you'll get more money added on to those means tested benefits. Okay, it's also not treated as income when they are calculating your benefits. So if you're applying for universal credit or if you're applying for child tax credits, they won't take into account you get an extra £400 a month because you get DLA. That will be disregarded. So don't let that put you off applying for it. If anything, it will mean you get more added onto your other means tested benefits. So that's the other reason it's really important to apply for it and get it. It's got 2 components, which I'll talk about in the next couple of slides, a mobility and a care. The mobility is not just for children that can't walk, okay, it is for children who can't walk, it's also for children who actually have behaviour difficulties or issues with going outdoors, which makes going out difficult and challenging for them and challenging for you, trying to keep them safe when they are outdoors. And again, I'll talk about that in the next couple of slides. The definition is the child's need for care and supervision must be substantially greater than a non-disabled child of the same age. So really what they're saying is compare your child to a child who doesn't have your child's additional needs. So 2 3-year-olds or 2 4-year-olds side by side. Substantially is quite a misleading word, which I'll talk about in a sec. It does sort of give the impression that your child's got to have huge needs. You know, they've really got to require 24-hour care to be eligible for disability leave allowance, but that's not the case at all. And obviously you must meet certain residence and presence tests, which means you can apply for benefits. If you are a parent or you know parents that are, have got anything attached to their eligibility to stay in the UK, then it's best to ring our helpline, who won't be able to give you advice, but they will be able to signpost you, the parent or the parent that you know, to an organisation that's licensed to give immigration advice. Okay, so do be aware of that. So why claim? You may need, and I also always say at this point, you will need extra support to enable your child's individual needs to be met. Okay, it is more expensive bringing up a child with additional needs for all sorts of reasons. It's the gateway to other support. And like I've just said in the previous slide, if you get a disability benefit like DLA or personal independence payment or carers allowance, it will often mean you get more added onto other means tested benefits. And it can actually mean you are able to claim other benefits like carers allowance. And some people, it might make you eligible for benefits in the first place if you've got fairly low income, but you're just not meeting that threshold to tip you over to being able to apply for universal credit. Then by getting DLA, it might just tip you over and mean that you are now eligible. And it's there to help meet the extra costs you have in looking after your child with additional needs. And like I've said earlier, it is entirely up to you to decide how you spend your DLA. Nobody can come and actually tell you, you've got to spend it that way. You're not spending it properly. It's got to be spent on this, this, and this. It's up to you how to decide how to spend it. And just to sort of reassure you why you should be applying for DLA, again, people think, well, what's it for? And, I'm not quite sure what they're talking about when they're saying the extra costs of bringing up a child with additional needs. Some examples of why your bills might be higher are you might have higher utility bills, your electricity, your water, your heating, because, for example, you might need to use an awful lot of water. If your child has got continence problems or they smear or whatever, your child's got to have more than one bath or shower in the day. That's twice as much water being used. If they mess their clothes up or they get very dirty, keep falling over, what have you, you've got extra washing. Your washing machine's on all the time, and you probably have to have your tumble dryer. If your child's got continence problems or they wet at night or what have you, again, you've got sheets to wash on a daily basis. So not only have you got higher bills because of that, but your equipment might wear out more quickly, your washing machine, your tumble dryer, all those things. And you might need to buy a bigger model, a more heavy duty one with a bigger drum. So you've got to buy more expensive equipment in the first place. And your heating bills might be high because if your child is very immobile, they can't move about easily. They get very cold. When they're cold, their muscles might stiffen up. Or it may be that your child is up all night, okay, and because of that, you need the heat on a bit more. So your heating bills are really expensive as well. It may be that you need to buy your child special food, okay, and it's not just because they've got a special diet like celiac or diabetes or what have you. It may be that because of their sensory issues, they will only eat certain types of food, certain colours of food, certain food textures, foods that have to come from a certain supermarket, and you can always guarantee it's going to be an expensive one like Waitrose or Marks and Spencer's. If they don't get that, they will refuse to eat. Or it may be that if you serve their food on the plate and it's touching or it's the wrong colour or something, you have to start from scratch all over again and make another meal. So you've chucked the food away and you have to start again, more costs. It may be that you've got additional transport costs because for example, you might have lots of therapy appointments, hospital appointments, always expensive to park at hospitals. If your child doesn't like public transport because they, again, sensory issues, don't like people standing next to them, too close to them, it makes them feel quite panicky. They don't like the smell of people. They don't like the movement, the sensation of the bus moving. So you've got to get taxis, okay? That's another cost. They're more expensive than the bus, which you've got a bus pass for. Or it could be that, again, like I've said, you've got lots of therapy appointments. So, you've got 2 or 3 appointments a week. That's 3 or 4 taxis a week you've got to pay for. Like I said earlier, you might have extra washing because of your child, if they, fall over a lot, if they crawl about on the floor because they're not yet walking, if they spill their food down themselves, if they've got continence issues. So you have to wash their clothes, their bed clothes more often. And like I've said, it might be that you need to buy more heavy duty equipment to manage those extra things. And also replacing household equipment. For example, like I've just said, because they break down more frequently, because your freezer's always packed because your child doesn't like going shopping, so you've always got to have it packed up because you can't go to the shops, you can't leave your house because your child has meltdowns when they've got to go to the supermarket. So you've got to order loads of stuff and put it in your freezer. Your freezer breaks down because it's constantly overloaded. As well as items breaking down, it may be that your child actually breaks items accidentally because they've got dyspraxia, hypotonia, they can't hold things very easily, they're clumsy, they bump into things and they drop what they're holding. Or it may be that they willfully break what they're holding. If they're having a meltdown because they're feeling overwhelmed by what's going on, or you've just said, no, we're not going to do that. It may be that they smashed the iPad that you bought for them 2 weeks ago. That's replaced the one before that they also smashed. So those are just some of the examples of why bills are going to be higher and the costs are higher of bringing up a child with additional needs. And I hope already you're starting to have a few light bulb moments and thinking, yes, that's exactly me. And that's encouraging you to think about applying for DLA if you're not already getting it. I'll also talk about the rates as well, just to make sure that what rate you are getting hopefully is the correct rate. Okay, just a sip of water. So how to claim DLA, if you're not already getting it, the number on the screen is how to actually claim it, 0800 121 4600. A couple of options on there, but one of the options will be, if you haven't claimed it before, press 3. Always actually phone for a form. It does give you the option of downloading it, and that's on their answering machine when you ring that number. Never download it off the internet, because if you ring for the form, what will happen is they will send you the form, and when you receive it in the post about 5 days later, it will have 2 date stamps on it. The top date will have the date you rang for the form, which might be the date, hopefully you hear this presentation. The bottom date will be 6 weeks after that. As long as you get the form completed with all your additional evidence sent back by that bottom date, and it must be with them by that bottom date, not you posting it in your letterbox. As long as they receive that, if they give it to you and you are eligible for DLA, it will be backdated to the date you rang for the form. And that's why it's really important to ring as opposed to downloading, because what will happen is you'll download it and it's pages and pages anyway. You'll probably sit on it for days, that becomes weeks, sometimes months, and you'll finally get around to completing it. You'll send it in, but then they will only backdate it to the date they receive it through their letterbox, which means that you might have missed out on days, weeks, months of DLA. So the important thing is to ring for the form and tell other parents that as well, but be aware that you've got to get it back by that 6 weeks deadline. If you can't get it back, I think my advice would be to ring for another form. It may be that when you ring them up, they say, oh, put a little note in and we'll consider it. But there's no guarantee that they will consider why you've actually got it back to them a few days late. So my advice is to ring for another form and start again, because that will have another date stamp on of the date you've rung for the form. Think of as many people as possible who can support your claim and ask them to provide evidence by doing a letter. Okay, so just think of everybody that's involved with your child, doctors, therapists, teachers. If you don't see that many people, who do you see? There's probably going to be nursery and childminder. There's going to be some people. So ask them, explain about DLA, just say, can you do a short note? Can you do a letter on headed paper, just to outline the sorts of difficulties that my child has got? If your child has got a diagnosis, to put that, and just a few lines then underneath about what sort of difficulties your child does have, what behaviours they exhibit, what they struggle with. always be careful that what letters you do put in do actually back up what you've put on the form. Unfortunately, some professionals, they like to be very positive, which is great, and they're right to be positive because your child is able to do lots of things and will learn to do more things as time goes by, maybe in a different order, more slowly, in the way that they choose to do it, but your child will make progress. For the purposes of DLA, they really just need to know what your child has difficulties with. So if you have a letter, even if it's from a top consultant, and it says everything your child struggles with and all the medication they're on, the treatment that they've been referred for. But if at the bottom of that, the letter says, well, your child sleeps really well at night and sleep is improving. If your child isn't sleeping well at night, and they never have, they probably have in, the last 2 nights out of, 12 weeks, then don't submit that letter, because if you're hoping to get the high rate of care, which means your child has got to have difficulties during the night, you won't get it because that letter has said your child's sleep is okay and it's improving. So some consultants are very approachable and they will take things out of their letters if you are able to do that. But my advice is just carefully look at what the professionals or people are putting in their letter and just make sure that it's backing up what you've got on the form. It's often a good idea, in fact, it's always a good idea, not often, always a good idea to get help filling in the form. And it's important to arrange this as early as possible. It's not easy to find people to actually help with form filling. They are few and far between organisations that will book an appointment and say, bring your form in and we'll do it for you with you. There are organisations, but they can be hard to find. If there are organisations, very often they're booked up because people have booked appointments with them in advance. So as soon as you ring for your form, try and find an organisation that will help with filling it in and book the appointment at that point. Even if they can give it you in 3 or 4 weeks' time, you'll still get it back to them by that 6-week deadline. That's the DLA form. And like I've said, you can look at it online, but don't print it off and fill it in. Ring for the form and it will be sent through in the post to your home address. A very long form and a very disheartening form to fill in as well, because all you're being asked to do is to put down what your child can't do, what they need help with, what they struggle with, which is really, really depressing and negative, because all you want to put is, yeah, they've learned to do this. They can now, hold the toothbrush and they can manage their back teeth. They can now sit for 3 minutes, even though it's only 3 minutes. They couldn't sit at all before. We've managed to get them to calm down before they do this activity. That's what you want to put down. But for DLA purposes, you just need to put down what your child struggles with and what they need help with. Okay. I've put this organisation up on a slide in case people haven't heard of it. Some of you might. It's called Turn to Us. And the reason I've put this organisation on is this is a charity that might be able to help you to find somewhere that can help you fill your form in. There's 2 things that are useful on this website, Turn to Us. First of all, it's got lots of information about benefits, including disability living allowance. As well as information on benefits, it's also got an online benefits checker. So if you're not sure what you can claim and you don't know where to start finding out, well, people have mentioned this, people have mentioned that, and I don't know how to go about it, will I be worse off if I claim it? If you look at their online benefits checker and actually put in all your details, and it is anonymous, it doesn't get sent to anywhere, it doesn't get sent to the local authority or HMRC or anywhere, put your situation in and it will ask everything about mortgage. Do you pay, or do you live with a landlord? Do you get housing benefit? How many children have you got? Is there anyone in your family getting a disability benefit? Are you disabled? So you put all that information in, click the button, and it will come up with a list of things that you might be able to claim. It's not categoric. It won't say you are definitely eligible for universal credit. It will say you might be. But then at least you know what to go and look into further, because it may well be that you are eligible to claim universal credit because you've started getting DLA for your child. But then you know to go off and where to find help with the claiming universal credit. So just be aware of the online benefits checker on the Turn to Us website. as well as information on benefits. They've also got a useful bit of their website that tells you about grants and charities and trusts that might give money towards things, because very often you need a lump sum to pay for something like a replacement iPad, because your child has to take an iPad everywhere. It's the one way to distract them and stop them having meltdowns. If they can look at their iPad the whole time, they can cope with appointments. You can tell them where you're going next. You can show them a picture of, where you're going for the day. If you want that pot of money to cover that item, have a look at that section of the Turn to Us website, the bit that helps you search for charities and trusts that might give money towards things. Again, put in all your details about where you live, how old your child is, what their condition is, if you know, and it will come up with a list of organisations that might give money towards that item. If you actually look at this page of the website, Find an Advisor, if you actually put in the topic, benefits, put your postcode in, then click the distance you're prepared to travel to get help to fill a form in, and I put 10 miles at least, click search, it will come up with a load of organisations that might help you with form filling. A lot of the time it will be just something like Age UK or Job Centre Plus, which probably won't be appropriate. They may not help you. Although in my neck of the woods in Solihull, Age UK does help parents of children apply for DLA. So don't even think Age UK might not be able to help you. But if you click the search button, it will come up with a list of organisations that might be able to help you with form filling. I would say ring a couple of them up and say, do you help with actually filling forms in? And if they don't, say, well, do you know another organisation in this locality that does do? And they may well know an organisation that you've never heard of. I myself work for a benefits organisation in a shop, in a parade, and the number of parents that lived in close proximity to it and never knew that we offered that service. So a lot of these organisations are not well known, but do your homework, just do a bit of digging around and see what's available. Everywhere has got a Citizens Advice Bureau. They're all independent charities running their own right all around the country, although there is a national line. Always get in touch with them as well. They do vary. Some are very good at form filling, others will just offer like a telephone helpline service, but always find your local CAB and find what they will do in terms of form filling or advice about benefits or helping appeal a benefit decision, because it may well be that they can do quite a lot for you. So definitely look at your CAB, Citizens Advice Bureau. As well as that, everywhere should have or will have a carer centre. Now, because you're parents, particularly parents of young children, very likely you don't see yourself as a carer because you are a parent, first of all, and rightly so. But if your child's got difficulties, you're a parent, but you're also caring for them, okay, to make life better and easier for them and keep them safe and what have you. Find out where your local carer centre is and actually get in touch with them and say, I'm looking after my child, they've got additional needs, might not have a diagnosis, but life is difficult because of their behaviour, their needs, lots of things are difficult in looking after them. They're not like my older child or the younger child. I don't have any of those difficulties. Can I register myself as a carer? And can you just tell me what support is out there for carers in this area? And it may well be that they do quite a lot for parent carers. They may run support groups. They may have a parent carer outreach worker. So just find out what services they offer and also ask them about form filling with DLA. There will certainly help with applying for carers allowance, which you might be able to apply for if you get DLA. So ask them about form filling and help with that. And also just ask about other benefits and forms of support that they give to parent carers. Very often they'll have special discount cards that enable you to get in reduced price or free to certain organisations in the local authority, like leisure clubs or gyms or what have you. So ask about that as well. And also, I know we don't like to talk about social services, but social services is there to support you as a parent or a disabled adult or anybody classed as vulnerable. They're there to support you. There's two branches to social services. There's the safeguarding, the child protection or adult safeguarding bit, which doesn't apply to you. The other bit is there to support people with disabilities, additional needs, carers. Now, there are pots of money to support you. There's pots of money for short breaks and payments to perhaps pay for somebody to come and take your child out, to take them to after school activities. There are these pots of money around, which most parents don't know about. And because they're attached to social services, most parents are too scared to ask about them. My advice is ask the carers centre, what help is there from social services to actually support me as a carer? What respite is there? Is there help towards giving me a break? Ask how the system works. How do you apply for it? And they should be able to tell you how to navigate around that. Also ask them about carers assessments, because you as a carer, and know you're a parent first, are entitled to a carers assessment if you're doing extra things to look after your child, adult, whoever. And if you've got siblings, if your child has got siblings, it may be that they are entitled to a young carers assessment if they help out, if they go running upstairs to grab the nappy, if they help your child to calm down, if they have to put up with things being cancelled because your child feels too overwhelmed and can't leave the house. It may be that your other children are entitled to young carers assessment and entitled to services in their own right. So that's just a bit of information about where to find support with form filling and other forms of support for you as being a carer. To give you a bit of information about DLA, it's got two components, the care component and the mobility component. Okay, personal independence payment is exactly the same. It's got two components, the daily living or care and also mobility. You can apply for DLA from 3 months of birth if your child has got, unfortunately, a terminal illness. And the definition, like I said a bit earlier on, was your child must require either substantially more help with bodily functions or substantially more supervision than a child of the same age. Okay, bodily functions means everything to do with daily living. So bathing, toileting, feeding, communicating, dressing, getting up out of bed, getting into bed, settling in bed, sleeping, school. So that's what comes under that. And what the definition is, child must require substantially more help with any of those activities or substantially more supervision. Supervision means you having to keep an extra eye on your child to keep them safe or to keep those around them safe or to stop them from damaging the environment. So if your child tends to self-harm and they get very anxious, worked up and agitated, even things like picking their skin or pulling their hair or whatever, if they're starting to get anxious, it may be that you have to keep your eye on them to stop them doing that in case they start to hurt themselves. Or it may be that if they get told they can't do something, if they've got ADD, ADHD, they cannot cope with being told to stop. No, you can't do that. They have a meltdown, they react. It may be that they start to lash out at you, to push you, to shove you, to hit their siblings. So you have to keep an extra eye on them to make sure that you keep your other children or you or other people in the house safe. Or you stop them from actually willfully breaking stuff in the property. It could be that they smash the door or throw something at the door, or they'll put their fist through something. And that's what's meant by supervision, to stop harm to themselves, to other people, as well as damaging the environment around them. The reason I say substantially is misleading. To qualify for the low rate of care of DLA, this has got 3 rates. Like I said, it's got a low, a middle and a high rate. To qualify for the low rate care of DLA, your child has only got to need help for about 1 hour out of 24 hours, which I'm sure most people listening to this will immediately qualify for. That 1 hour does not have to be in one block. It could be that your child needs 15 minutes extra to coax them out of bed. They hate school, they hate the thought of it, it makes them anxious, or they hate having to leave the house. So you have to do a lot of coaxing. It takes 15 minutes to actually get them to cooperate, to agree to get out of bed. With eating, it's always difficult. They've got to go through 2 or 3 rituals, or, They will only eat once they've seen the food, or it takes them ages because they won't sit. So you've got to keep getting them back to the table. So you need to give an extra 15 minutes of help with all meals. And then getting them to bed at night, you have to stay with them for about half an hour because they won't settle. They're too scared. They're too anxious. They're very active. They just want to run around and go back on the trampoline. You've tried to wear them out, hasn't worked. So they want to go out in the garden again. You have to stay with them for half an hour, trying to bring them down and relax them. That has taken about an extra hour. That immediately qualifies for the low rate of care, having to do that extra bits and pieces of help to get your child to do those activities, get up, eat, and settle in bed. So that's why I think most people shouldn't be getting the low rate of care. Everybody should be getting at least the middle rate, because I don't know many children that just require that little amount of help. Sometimes they do. For example, if your child's got eczema, it may be that you have to bath them in the morning, in the evening, put special emollients on, and apart from that, you don't have to do anything else. That might be a scenario where your child would qualify and probably just get low rate of care. But other than that, most children should actually be on the middle rate of care. To get the middle rate of care, you've just got to be giving your child more than 1 hour of care, either during the day or during the night. I'll explain what the day and night is because it's very specific in DLA case law. The daytime is from when you as a household start to get up, so 6, I hate to say 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock, through to when you all start to go to bed at night and the light is switched off, if it ever does get to be switched off. I know a lot of houses, it probably doesn't. That is classed as the day. So from when the house gets up to when the house goes to bed. The night time is the bit in between that. It's the bit when everybody's gone to bed through to when everybody starts to get up. A lot of people think, a lot of parents think that my child needs help at night because it takes them 2 hours to get them up to bed. And I'm still trying to get them to sleep at 9 o'clock. But unfortunately, if the rest of the house is up, that doesn't qualify as the night time. That is still daytime. So just to be clear about that, because I know a lot of people, a lot of parents get confused by what is the day and what is the night time. But like I said, the middle rate is simply more than 1 hour of care, either during the day or it can be just during the night. But I don't know any child who just has problems during the night and nothing during the day. Like I've said earlier, and I hope you've got the gist of this now, excuse me, care isn't just you physically doing things for your child, like feeding them, turning them, lifting them or transferring them. It's all the other things you do to get your child to help them to do the activities. So it's the prompting, it's the reminding, it's the explaining, it's the encouraging. So if your child will only go in the shower if they see pictures of it, so they know what they've got to do next, they've got their before and after cards, now and next cards. If you have to do that, if you have to give them lots of warnings, so you have to show them the timer, so they know it's 15 minutes before you're going to change that activity. If the activity takes longer, then that is all extra help that your child needs to complete the activity. So even though they've stepped into the shower, okay, and you don't need to do any of that, you still need to do all the donkey work to get them to get in the shower in the first place. And then they might just not wash themselves properly anyway, because they're a bit oblivious to their body parts. They've got really reduced body awareness, poor proprioception. They don't know where their arms and legs are. And so you have to do all that washing. Otherwise, they wouldn't wash any of themselves. So that's just to reassure you as well about things that need to be included in the DLA form. I have to prompt my child, I have to remind them, I have to give them warnings, I have to give them countdowns. Then I have to prompt them in the shower, remember to wash your back, remember to wash your feet. And then, I have to wait for them to, stand there for 10 minutes in the freezing cold because it's needed for their sensory needs. And then they will get out, they'll step out themselves and then you dry them. So you've given a really good breakdown description of why bathing or showering takes that longer and the help your child needs to bath and shower. To get the high rate of care, you've got to be giving your child help during the day for more than an hour. And remember, the day is when the household gets up through to when it goes to bed. but also during the night as well. It's not just enough to be popping your head around the door once just to check your child is okay and going back to bed. You've got to need to get up at least 2 or 3 times and be with your child for a reason. Okay, so it's not just, like I say, if you pop your head around the door, that wouldn't qualify. And you've got to sort of demonstrate why your child wakes up and why they do have problems at night. So this is all the sorts of information that they like to see included on a DLA form. You know, why your child wakes at night, what are the reasons? And it could be things like, if your child's got ADHD, they just can't stop their brain whirring. Okay, they never want to sleep. It could be because of their sensory issues. They're constantly woken up. You've done everything you can to eliminate sounds. They still wake up all the time. The rustling of this, the click of the boiler. And once they're awake, they're really anxious. So you've said why they wake up. Okay, some children perhaps on the spectrum don't feel that sensation of being tired. They just don't need sleep. So you've put your reason for the waking up, and they then want to know what happens when they wake up. And that's when you need to give a description of why you need to be with your child. And it's not just things like I have to be with my child to turn them, to change them, to take them to the toilet. It could be those things, in which case put that down on the form. Again, if your child's got continence problems, maybe you have to change them, change the bed or what have you. Or it may be that they can't turn if they've got cerebral palsy, they're very immobile. You have to position their legs. They can't get themselves around the right way in bed once they start to move. It could be physical reasons you have to be there, but it could be also because of things like their anxiety. They're always extremely anxious at night. It's when their anxiety is at its worst. They're thinking about what happened that day. They're remembering what they heard on the radio, saw on the telly a week ago, but then they really need to talk about it, and they get more and more worked up. If they don't talk about it, they won't sleep at all then. So that's the reason you have to be with your child, to help them manage their anxieties, to treat them in a lot of ways. Or it may be that you have to be up to supervise your child. If once they wake up, they get out of bed, no awareness of danger, they go downstairs, they want to go out the front door, they want to go and visit the neighbours 4 doors down, oblivious to the risks, or want to go out in the garden because, you know, they fancy climbing the fence, or they just climb on furniture because they've got no sense of danger. They love the sensory feedback of actually standing on a high surface and jumping down, and that, you know, that feedback when they land on their feet. So they've got no sense of danger, so you have to be up with them, because if you didn't get up and be with them, they might be at risk to themselves. Or if they go and wake all their siblings up and they get really agitated with their siblings, if they don't get up and start playing with them and they start to whack them, you have to get up to keep your other children safe. So those are the sorts of reasons why you would have to get up. You need to be putting down why your child wakes, why you have to get up, and what would happen if you didn't get up. You know, their anxiety would get worse. They might get out the house. They would hurt themselves. They would hurt someone else. If they get anxious and they start to self-harm, it may well be that, you know, you have to be up to stop them doing that, so that doesn't get worse. So if you need to get up once during the night and be with your child for a very long time, like 2 hours, that might also qualify, even though you're just getting up once during the night, but you need to be up for a very long time. Once you do get up, that might also qualify for the high rate of care. But they do like to see all this information on the form. They don't just like the boxes to be ticked. In terms of filling in the form, don't ever just tick boxes. There are boxes to tick, which says how long does it take, how often, how many times a day. Don't just tick that and assume they will know that because your child's got Down syndrome, they mustn't be able to, you know, communicate easily. Give a description of the difficulties. Never actually put on the form, I help my child to get dressed, because it sounds like you're doing all the work, and if you didn't do that, they might just do it themselves. Always put, my child needs help to dress, because it takes them so long, because they're so distractible, because they can't focus on a task, because they can't think about things sequentially. So always put a description of, my child has difficulties and needs help with this activity because, and this is what I have to do. So a few lines, there's usually not enough space on the form, but do write that extra information at the bottom of the page, or there's a space for additional information at the back of the DLA form. So always give a description, don't just tick the boxes, and always put my child needs help too, not I help my child to get dressed, I help mine. Talking about the mobility rates, there's 2 rates of this. With the care, there's 3, low, middle and high. And I hope you sort of understand the different rates now. And if you are getting DLA at the low rate, I hope you know now what the middle rate entails and whether you should be claiming that. And I'll tell you how to actually get that looked at again in the next couple of slides. The mobility has got 2 rates, okay? It's got a low and a high rate. You can only claim the mobility component of DLA from the age of 3 years. And you can only claim the high rate of mobility from 3 years. You can't get the low rate of mobility from 3 years. And I'm sorry if I'm giving lots of times and numbers now, but just be aware of that. A child will qualify for the high rate of mobility if they either can't walk at all, so if they're a wheelchair user, or if they're virtually unable to walk, if their balance is very poor, if they've got dyspraxia, severe dyspraxia, hypertonia, which means it's very painful to walk, hypermobility. If they've got mild cerebral palsy, they have to wear splints to walk. And if they didn't, they'd be so wobbly, they would trip over all the time, or they use the furniture or the walls to mobilise, or they walk on their knees. That would qualify for virtually unable to walk. So the walking difficulties do have to be quite significant. You might also qualify if you can actually justify that there might be a deterioration in your child's health if they overexert themselves by walking too far, if they've got a heart defect, a congenital heart defect, if they've got severe asthma or any type of respiratory or breathing problems. It could be argued that there might be a deterioration if they walk too far, their lips might go blue, they have to stop. Or it could be that they've got epilepsy, and if their balance is very poor because they've got ataxia, they're very shaky, if they fall and bang their head, then that might be, very difficult. That might result in more damage, brain damage. So you could argue that there might be deterioration on those grounds if your child falls frequently and they've got head injury, and it might make that worse. You can also qualify if your child has severe visual impairment and deaf and blind. And we're not just talking about, mild hearing problems like needing grommets or mild sight problems, squint or what have you, even if it might be severe. They do actually have specific measurements for degree of visual impairment. Okay, so you would have to send in a certificate of the visual impairment to actually justify getting it on those grounds. You might also be able to qualify for the high rate of mobility on severe mental impairment and challenging behaviour grounds. Okay, it is difficult to get it on these grounds, and you probably will need a lot of supporting evidence. Contact has got a lot of information on this. We've got a fact sheet on how to get higher rate of mobility if your child can walk, but because of their mental impairment and challenging behaviours, it's very difficult to go out and keep them safe when they're outdoors. So just be aware of that and have a look at the contact sheet to basically qualify for it on these grounds. And this is a lot of information to take in. Your child has got to satisfy 5 tests. First of all, you have to be getting the high rate of care. So if you only get the middle rate, you won't qualify on these grounds. Your child has got to have severe mental impairment and an impairment of social functioning, and I'll explain what those things are, because of brain development that's stopped or it's incomplete. That's an awful lot to take in. So as a result of your child's brain development being slower or different or incomplete, they have got difficulties with their learning and mental capacity, and also with their ability to function socially. DLA case law does recognise that children on the spectrum, on the autistic spectrum, fit this criteria, because it's now deemed that people with autism have arrested brain development. So children on the spectrum would meet that criteria. But what you've got to justify is that they've got the severe mental impairment and also the problems with social functioning. Severe mental impairment means your child has got an IQ below a certain level. It's below 55. That might be fairly straightforward if your child has got severe learning difficulties. A lot of children on the spectrum might be extremely bright and clever. They might be able to read, 2, 3 foreign languages by the age of 5. But what they can't do is apply that massive intelligence to everyday situations. So even though they might be extremely academically bright and can do things that an Oxford undergraduate does at the age of 6, if they can't apply that intelligence, then that would meet the criteria for having severe mental impairment. An example of that is your child is academically very bright, but they still cannot work out how to dress themselves. They can't get the order right. Okay, they're 5 years of age, they're 4 years of age. You've been doing it for the past 2 years. You've only got 3 items of clothing on the bed, underwear, socks, and vest, and they still can't work out which one to put on first, which way round. That's just an example of how they can't apply their brilliance and their academic ability to normal everyday life, and that would meet the criteria for severe mental impairment. And problems with social functioning means they have problems forming relationships. It might be with adults, with other children, with other family members. So if your child prefers to be on their own, they don't make eye contact, they can only cope with things on their own terms, they can't cooperate with anybody else, that could be described as your child having problems with social functioning. Now we're only on test 2, so that's test 2. And do be aware that Contact's got a really good fact sheet on this, how to get high rate mobility on these grounds. So if you look at our website, you'll be able to actually download that or read it. Test 3 is that your child has got to have challenging behaviours, and that can be anything that's out of the ordinary and extreme. So if your child shouts a lot, screams a lot, claps her hands, claps, runs off, breaks things, those are all examples of challenging behaviours, behaviours that are out of the ordinary. Test 4 is that your child has regularly got to require you to intervene to keep them safe or somebody else around them safe, or your property or the environment safe. So that means you've got to keep an eye on your child a lot of the time. So if your child can be in a room for a couple of hours watching the telly, you probably wouldn't be able to satisfy this test, because that means they've gone for 2 hours without any supervision. You know that they're okay. So your child has got to regularly require you to check on them to make sure they're safe and everybody around them is safe, and the environment. You could argue that, every time you leave your child on your own, you just don't know what they're going to get up to. So you're continually anxious about what they might do. So you could argue that and give lots of examples of the sorts of challenge behaviours they've got where you have had to intervene and sit with them, perhaps hold their hands to stop them banging something or take something off them to stop them breaking it. You could argue that, put it all down. And the 5th test is that your child's behaviours are unpredictable. So in other words, you just don't know when you're going to get these behaviours. You know that, if you take them out in early morning or evening to the park, there won't be other children there. You know that the walk to the park, there won't be much traffic. You're doing everything you can to plan your environment and your trip to the park to stop your child having either a meltdown or a shutdown where they withdraw. But you can't guarantee it. Even though you've done all that, a pigeon flies in front of them because they've got a phobia about birds or they hate birds, or if they see a green traffic light and they're obsessed with traffic lights and they run towards it, you have to intervene and hold your child and actually keep a hold of them to stop them running off into the road. So that's an example of how you regularly have to intervene and how your child's behaviours are unpredictable, even if you try and organise your day so you don't get those behaviours. So those are the 5 tests you have to meet. Not easy to get. Most parents end up having to go to tribunal to argue their case, but do be aware it is possible. Okay. The low rate of mobility you get from when your child is age 5, if your child is able to walk, but going out is always difficult because they need more guidance or supervision. And we're not talking about your child just needing a gentle handhold, to make sure that they don't walk into the road. We're talking about behaviours, for example, like your child doesn't like to leave the house in the first place. They get really overwhelmed, okay, when they have to leave the house because they can't cope with bright lights, noise, busyness. So it's always a battle to get them out. When they're out, again, they might get overwhelmed very quickly, in which case they just freeze to the spot. They won't move, or they'll have a meltdown, and you have to pick them up and basically go back home or get them in the car again. You go into a supermarket, they refuse to go into the supermarket because it's not in the plan or it's not on their terms, or they just don't want to. Got to do everything on their terms all the time. They walk past a shop and they can smell fish and chips, and that makes them heave, and that makes them, really worked up because they can't tolerate that. So I hope that's given you a flavour of if going out and about is difficult for any of those sorts of things, which means that you have to really give your child a lot more guidance, help and support and supervision rather, to keep them safe and help them to function outdoors. You might make the criteria for the low rate of mobility. Okay, and I hope that's given you some sort of examples already of the sorts of things that might help you to qualify, which will probably make you think already, I should be getting this, or I should put in an application for it, or I should be applying for it in the first place. If your child frequently refuses to walk, and I'm talking about frequently, meaning it happens a lot, and when your child refuses to walk, they won't walk for a long time, so it's not just 60 seconds, it's longer. If your child frequently refuses to walk, you might qualify for the high rate of mobility on the grounds that they are virtually unable to walk, but you do have to demonstrate and give probably a bit of a diary of how often it happens, when it happens, what might have made it happen, how long you had to wait before your child walked again. They will want to see that amount of evidence of, your child's refusal to walk to qualify under the virtually unable to walk criteria. Okay, so just to summarise, you can get mobility from the age of 3 if your child can't walk or is virtually unable to walk. You might also get it if your child has got severe learning difficulties or severe challenging behaviours, which means going out is extremely difficult. Or you might get it from the age of 3 if they refuse to walk frequently and often and for long periods of time. But you can also apply and may qualify for the low rate of mobility from the age of 5 if going out is difficult for any reason, which means your child needs more guidance or supervision to keep them safe and everybody around them safe when they're outdoors. Just the top tips to run through. Take your time when you're completing the form. Don't try and finish it all in one go. I say that, but I think the temptation, if you don't do it all in one go or get somebody to help you do it all in one go, is to put it away and think, well, I'll come back to it. The danger is you will feel so overwhelmed by the time you're on page 23, you will sort of put off going back to it. And then you might go beyond your 6 weeks deadline, which I really don't want people to do. So that there is some mileage in trying to get it, at least the form filled in, and then gather your evidence afterwards. As I keep saying, try and get specialist advice from a welfare benefits advisor, and go to the Turn to Us website or ask your carers centre where you can get help with form filling, or you've got your citizens advice bureaus as well. If they are able to help you fill the form in, always take a copy, and always take a copy anyway. I know it will cost money because there's pages and pages, or take photos of it. But always do, because when you come to reapply, then you've got a copy of what you put last time and you can just duplicate it, or if anything's changed, got better or got a bit worse, more difficult, then you can just add in those extra details. If you've got the energy, keep a diary the week before, just to demonstrate what it's like to look after your child. I know a lot of you parents will not have the time and energy to do that. The only time I would say it's useful to do a diary is perhaps night times, if you want to give examples of what your child is like over a 7-night period, or for those refusals to walk, if you're trying to get the high rate of mobility, that might be useful just to send in a few pages of a diary. Cross out mistakes rather than using Tipp-Ex, because it is a legal document and anybody in the DWP could have actually amended it, okay, if they see that on the page. Give as much information as possible. Don't just tick the boxes. Put an explanation under each of the activities. Under dressing, tick the boxes. Your child needs help with this twice a day. The activity takes 20 to 25 minutes. And on the lines, my child has difficulties with dressing because of their sensory issues. They prefer not to wear any clothes, or because of their ADHD, they're highly distractible and they require lots of prompting to keep them on task. And if I didn't do that, then they either would wear inappropriate clothes and would be late for school, or, example. So that's the sort of things to be putting down on the form. And as I say, my child needs help too. Not I give my child help, I help my child, I help my child. So don't put it like that. Also, never put good days. It's bad and better days. Good days means you have days when nothing is a problem. And I think that's rarely the case with parents. Include supporting evidence with the form, but please be aware of what you're submitting. And if you're actually arguing for something, but the letter you're including with it says not what you want it to say, don't include it. If it's going to mean the DWP look at it and say, well, we can see here that the child functions great in school, no problems, keeps up, no behaviour issues, we won't give them any DLA. So don't include that. I will just say a few words about that bit of the form after I've finished this slide, because I know school education, nursery can be a bit of an issue with submitting evidence. Ask yourself, have you included enough evidence to convince someone who's never met your child about the sort of difficulties they have and what a day in their life is like? And like I said earlier, always keep a copy of the form. The point I just made about school and nursery and education, the difficulty with schools and nurseries, they are there to teach a child and to help them to do things that they couldn't do before or do things better. Very often, they will actually put very, very positive things down in any letters or reports they write. I think it's really helpful just to have a conversation, if you can, with school or nursery. I know sometimes relationships can be very strained if there's differences of opinions. And it is difficult with children with additional needs, because sometimes, a lot of the time, they might be great in school because they might mask their difficulties. If your child's got autism or thought to have autism, they're very good at pretending that they've got no difficulties. They smile, they don't say boo, because they don't want anybody to look at them. They don't want the attention focused on them. So they don't say a thing. So that's why they look like the model child. And if they're academically all right, they keep up with the work as well. The problem is when you bring them home and they're out of that structured environment and they don't have to mask, their behaviour goes AWOL. They are a different child. They have a massive either shutdown where they're just completely overwhelmed and withdraw for an hour, or they will have a meltdown and just wreak havoc everywhere and will not listen to you. So it's very important when you're filling in that bit of the form which asks about child's educational nursery, that you put that down, that you put down on the form that their behaviour is good, that they respond well to the structure, that they like the one-to-one because they've got somebody sitting next to them, that they know what's happened. It's a very set routine in nursery. They have drink when they go in, story. They can cope with it because it's 2 hours of structure, but you can't do that when they come home because you've got 2 other children to look after, or you've got to get the tea. So they have no structure, and that's when their behaviour, just like I said, goes AWOL. But do put that down on the form, how the behaviour is different between the structured environment at school or nursery and at home. But also, if you can have that conversation with school and say you're applying for DLA, can you please just put down what difficulties you see in school or nursery and what extra help you give? Do you try and reduce attention on my child? Do you try and lessen their anxiety? Do you try and give them ear defenders when they're going into the playground? Do you also let them sit with you every time in story time because they know exactly where their seat's going to be, so they know what they've got to be doing? So please give examples of all those extra things you do in nursery and school to help my child fit in and be able to manage. Okay, so that is DLA. A lot of people ask about, well, when I send the form off and it gets to the DWP, who exactly are these people that are looking at it, making decisions about whether I get it or not, or what rate? The DWP are just DWP workers. They are not medical experts. They're not doctors, therapists, OTs, psychologists, physios, teachers. They're not any of those things. They are just DWP workers. That's why it's crucial that you put as much information down on your form and as much supporting evidence as possible, because they will be looking at that because they may never have heard of your child's condition. If it is a rare metabolic disorder or what have you, they may know nothing about it. So you've really got to give the letters that give, the medication your child's on, the tests they've had, the scans, the blood tests. They need to see that. They need to see all these people that are looking at your child, and not just you filling a form in, ticking boxes and letting them look at it and making a decision when they know nothing really about your child's condition. So that's the reason it's really important to actually submit evidence and information. They don't like appointment letters, but I say do send them in, because they will see then the concern over your child, that they're being referred to all these different people, even if you've not seen them. If you're on the massive waiting list to see them, it's evidence of the number of people that are on board trying to get to the bottom of your child's difficulties. How long you'll get it for, when you send the form back, they will look at it, they'll read all your evidence, and a decision maker will make a decision on whether you get DLA, and if you are going to get it, what rate you're going to get. Are they going to give you low, medium or high care? Are they going to give you any mobility? Are they going to give you the low rate or the high rate? They will make that decision, and they'll also decide how long to give you the DLA for. There's no set time. So if you get awarded it, one parent might get it for 2 years, another parent might get it for 4 years. It's very difficult. There's no set time. That's the other reason it's important to put as much information as possible down on the form, in the hope and the belief that if they see all this information, they'll agree that your child's got quite significant difficulties. They'll give it you for 5 years instead of 1.5, because needs might change, because they haven't been given enough information in the first place. So as much information so you'll get the right award, the right level of care or mobility, and the right length of award as well. Because what you don't want to be doing is doing this form every 18 months, because you never quite give them enough information. You want to try and get it for as long as possible, so you can just get on with it and not have to do all these blessed forms. When they give it you, like I said, they'll make a decision how long for. You will get reminded when it's just coming up to be renewed. If they've given it you for 2 years, in 18 months' time, they will actually send you another form and say, do you want to renew DLA again? They'll give you about 4 months to decide, and then to get the form completed and sent back to them if you want to renew it. So in other words, they've given it for 2 years. You've got it. That 2 years is coming to an end. It's coming up to sort of 18 months before that 2 years is due to end. And they send you another form. You then decide whether you want to reapply. And obviously most of you will want to reapply. And then you have to do the whole thing all over again. It is like starting from scratch. It will just be the same form again, a 42-page document, starting from scratch. They won't just look back at what you put first time. So this has to be a brand new, fresh claim. But look back at the first one you did, especially if you had help to fill it in, and just copy it down, okay? Or add bits in. If, for example, there's been a change, your child's been put on different medication, they've received another diagnosis, they've now started school, if they've been given an education, health and care plan, or they've got more support going into school. So put all those extra things down when you come to renew. You can, if after hearing this talk, you think, I think my child should be getting the high rate of care, or I should be getting the low rate of mobility, I get nothing at the moment. You can ask for them to look at your DLA award at any time. It's called a super session. Don't worry about that word. You can ask for them to look at your DLA and look at it again, trying to get the award changed to get a higher rate. Obviously, if your child improves, you should be telling them that as well. So if your child is on oxygen when they come out of hospital, but gradually they don't have to be on oxygen, so you don't have to help them during the night and they can breathe fine on their own, you would have to tell them about that change, that they might not meet the quality, the high rate of care, because they don't need help at night time. But if your child's needs have increased, or if you just didn't put the right information down in the first place, you can ask for them to look at the award again saying that their needs have increased. And what you would do is ring DLA, the same number as the one that you ring for when you claim the form in the first place, get through to them and actually say, I want to actually ask for a change of circumstances or a supersession, or I want you to look at my DLA award again because my child's needs have actually increased. And they will then send you another form, but the good news, it's a much, much shorter form. It's not the 42-page document. It's a very short form with a few pages. And what you will do is you'll just fill out the first 2 or 3 pages, which are just your basic details, your child's name, school they go to, the GP, is there any of that changed? No, 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 no. And then it will ask you, has your child's mobility needs changed? And if you want to actually start claiming mobility, then you tick yes, and you just fill in that bit and you explain how the mobility needs have increased. It will then say, has your child's daytime needs increased? If you don't want them to look at that because you're getting middle rate of care because you got the right award in the first place, tick no. Then the next bit, has your child's nighttime needs increased? Well, if you are getting up more at night, or you were getting up more at night anyway before you heard this talk and you really feel you should be getting high rate of care, tick yes, and you just fill that page in. So you can see you're only just filling in the bit that you're wanting them to look at again. Always do try and get supporting evidence if you are wanting them to look at it again, because they will threaten that you might lose your DLA or it might go down, which puts a lot of parents off. So just be confident that you've got information to actually support this change of circumstances. You know, you can get a letter of the health visitor or teacher or whoever or physio to say about the mobility needs or, you know, the nighttime needs. So just be aware of that. If you don't know whether to apply or get your award looked at again, ring our helpline and they might be able to talk you through. If it's complicated, they might put you through to the welfare benefit specialist who would chat through to you whether it's a good move or not. If they turn you down or they don't give you the right rate or they only give you DLA for 6 months, the first thing to do if you're unhappy with the decision is to ask for them to look at their decision again. And in simple terms, what you're saying is, you're wrong, you've got the decision wrong, I'm right, and I want you to look at it. The first stage is called the reconsideration or mandatory reconsideration. A lot of technical terms I know. Just know this is the first step in the process of looking at the DLA award, whether it's the refusal to give you a DLA in the first place or they're not giving you the right rate you think you should be getting. So ring them up. What you need to do is say, please send me your reasons, how you came to that decision in the post, so I can look at them and work out how you came to your decision. That will then tell you what to argue against. If it's put down, you'll get that in the post in 4 or 5 days, read it, and then you'll know what to argue against. If it's put down, no evidence of medication, so no sleep problems, not being seen by any sleep counsellors, well, it may be that you're not seen by sleep counsellors because there's no sleep clinic in your authority and nobody can help you with it. Or it may be that you've tried out a programme anyway and it's just not worked. Contact's got a lot of information on sleep, and another charity, Cerebra, like CEREBRA, Cerebra, and we'll make sure you get that link, have got a lot of information on sleep, and they've got programs, sleep programs, templates, diary sheets. Go on their website, print those off, do that for 3 or 4 weeks, well, a couple of weeks. Then you've got some evidence that you've followed the Cerebra sleep guidance, that you've done this and it hasn't worked and your child still wakes up at night. And when they wake up, you have to be with them, and they wake up most nights of the week at least a couple of times. So that could be some evidence that you send back to back up your child's nighttime needs. So that's the first stage in asking for them to look at their decision again, asking for a mandatory reconsideration. Okay, you are supposed to do that in 28 days. Okay, that's what it says, and a lot of parents panic then, thinking, I'm never going to do it, I just won't bother. If there's any reason you're going to struggle to get it back to them in 28 days, they are supposed to accept difficult circumstances. For example, if your child's been ill one of your other children's been ill, you've had a bereavement, whatever, or they've gone in hospital or broken their leg or something, if you ring them up and say, I do want you to look at the decision again, I want to ask for this mandatory reconsideration, but I'm not going to get it back to you in the 28 days. I need longer. Can you make a note of that on the system? And they will probably say, yes, that's fine. They are usually pretty good, as long as you tell them. If you don't, they won't know. They will just think you're not challenging anything. They are supposed to give you, and you won't believe this, up to 13 months to submit a request for a reconsideration. And we have delivered these sessions before for parents who've come on. One parent hadn't bothered because she had mental health problems and she thought, I can't be bothered. They've turned me down. I'm just going to leave it. But we encouraged her, even though it was 6 months down the line, to actually go back and say she wanted a late reconsideration. She had mental health problems, which had meant that she hadn't been able to do it sooner. She wants to get the ball rolling again. She wants them to look at their reason and say, well, it's wrong to refuse her child DLA. So just be aware of that. But the more months that go by, the better the reason has to be. If they still turn you down, if they still say, we're right, you're wrong, you're not getting DLA, or you're not going to get the high rate of care, you're not getting any mobility, for example, the next stage is to go to appeal or tribunal. It's the same thing. Always do follow this through, because over 70% of cases succeed at appeal. So if they turn you down or you don't get the right rate, appeal the decision, because the likelihood is if you go to appeal, the appeal tribunal will back you up and say, yes, DWB got it wrong. We think you should get DLA from what you've said to us today. An appeal is basically going to tribunal, where during lockdown it was done over the phone, then it was video. They are getting back to face-to-face appeals now, where you have to go to the tribunal service and actually sit down in front of a panel of 3, which I know is anxiety-provoking, but bear in mind, most succeed. You stand a far better chance of actually succeeding if you go to appeal and actually see someone face-to-face. And they will just ask you questions about, you know, you put down on the form that your child's behaviours are unpredictable. Can you just tell us about that? Is there no way that you could just stop them being overwhelmed by giving them a hat to wear? And then you can explain, well, no, they've got sensory needs. I wouldn't tolerate wearing a hat. And this is what it's like. You give them an example and they really get a sense of, yes, we can really see how it's really difficult to manage your child when they go outdoors. The appeal tribunal is a judge, plainclothes, and a person either side, either a doctor or GP, and some sort of disability person on the other side, all taking it in turns to ask questions. You can take somebody with you, not to speak on your behalf. You'll have to do the talking, but they can be there for moral support. So if you want to take your partner, you know, sister-in-law, friend, or somebody from an organisation, although it's difficult to get people to free up time to go to tribunals, then do take them with you. They won't be able to speak, but the panel might say at the end, if you've got anything to add, they might just give that person, you know, a couple of minutes to say, she forgot to mention that she gets a blue badge. The local authority have given her a blue badge because, you know, it's so difficult to take him outdoors now. We just have to park right next to the supermarket because he's run into the road. He's actually had an accident twice. So it may be that the other person could just add bits in that you forgot to say. But do go to appeal. There is a form to fill in and you can download that off the internet. The appeal form, any problems with remembering what the form is, ring our helpline and say, how to appeal a decision. Okay, bad news is that the waiting time for appeals is around 40 weeks at the moment. So bear in mind, you will sit on a very long waiting list, waiting for your case to go up the list. So eventually you will be able to go to tribunal, and really do go to tribunal. Can't stress that enough. The good news is that if you succeed, and over 70% do, everything is backdated. So most parents end up coming out of tribunal with hundreds of pounds worth of backdated DLA pay, in some cases, thousands of pounds. So always go to appeal if you're not happy. Okay. So the next slide I'm going to go on to is as a follow-on from Disability Living Allowance, and it's Carers Allowance. And this is the benefit you can actually claim and might be entitled to if your child is awarded either the middle or high rate of care of DLA. If you get the low rate of care, you won't be able to claim carer's allowance. And that's the other reason I sort of keep going on about people really probably shouldn't be on the low rate of care of DLA, because it means that you can't claim this benefit. And as I say, I don't think most children just require 1 hour over 24 hours of extra support, care, prompting, reassuring, encouraging, explaining. So this is the benefit that you can apply for if you get middle or high rate of care. It's not means tested. So that means, again, you can actually have loads of savings and loads of property, stocks and shares, and still be eligible to claim. But what there is an earnings limit. And you can't currently earn over a certain amount. And this amount does go up, you know, periodically. It went up from 126 and it's now £128 a week. If you earn a penny over that, then you won't be eligible to claim carer's allowance. So you've got to be within that sort of earnings bracket, that or less. Okay, so you're not means tested on your savings, but you can't earn more than a certain amount. I'll talk about the earning amount in a sec, because there are ways of getting your earnings down to make you meet that £128 a week criteria. You need to be providing at least 35 hours of care per week. That's not just hands-on care, like I keep saying, it's all the other things that go with looking after your child. So as well as the prompting, reassuring, encouraging, explaining, etc., which I hope you've now got your heads around, it's all the things you do, like the clearing up, the preparing, the getting ready, the phone calls, organising appointments, the prescriptions. It's everything to do with caring. That meets the 35-hour caring rule at least. Okay, so it's not just the physical hands-on care. It doesn't matter if you live with somebody in your house who's earning. Again, carer's allowance doesn't matter if your partner or whoever is earning within your household. It's purely on you, the person claiming carer's allowance, those earnings. You can't claim carer's allowance if you're a full-time student. Usually, whether you're full-time or part-time is determined by the place that you study at. So even though you're doing a course that's only, you know, a few hours a week, if your where you study doesn't deem that as part-time, you won't be able to claim it. So you, as full-time, sorry, you won't be able to claim it. So you can't get carer's allowance if you're a full-time student. I think the thing to do is to ring where you're studying and actually ask to clarify, is what I'm studying classed as full-time or part-time? Okay, I know a lot of parents have come a cropper on this. They are studying, you know, trying to better themselves, trying to get better jobs and what have you, but they didn't realise that they were studying on a full-time course, even though it was only, you know, 3 days a week or something. It was still deemed as full-time, and really they shouldn't have been getting their carer's allowance. Carer's allowance get wind of that, and unfortunately they have to pay that carer's allowance back again. So just have a word with your college or where you're studying at. You can claim carer's allowance from the age of 16. So a young carer could claim carer's allowance if they're caring for a parent or what have you. But again, they can't be in full-time education. If you were a self-employed, what the carer's allowance unit do will look at your, you know, your figures for the previous tax year to see what your earnings were, to average out whether, you know, what your earnings were, to see whether you might come under that £128 a week. Okay, if there's big variations in, you know, earnings, then they probably will take a snapshot over a period of time, a few months, to again work out whether you fit and meet that criteria of earning no more than, on average, £128 a week. I think the thing to do if you're self-employed or studying is to keep in close contact with the carer's allowance unit, because that's the unit that accepts your carer's allowance claims and deals with them and writes out to you. Tell them about what's going on. I mentioned as well about the £128, about there being ways to get your earnings down. If you earn just a bit over that or over that amount, What you can include in your earnings is what you pay into a private pension. You can take 50% or half of what you pay in every week or month off your earnings. And a very simple example of this is if you earn £130 a week, you know that you're £2 over, you can't claim carer's allowance. If you paid in £4 a week to a private pension, they would take £2 of that off your earnings. So pay £4 into a private pension, take 50% of that off, which is £2. They would then take £2 off your earnings of £130 a week, and that brings you down to the £128. That's just one example of how you can get your earnings down. Having said that, Carers Allowance Unit will want to see clear documentary evidence that you're doing this. It won't just be enough for you to ring them up and say, I'm paying £4 in, can you knock £2 off? They'll want to see statements of your pension contributions, and they will tell you how often they want to see those statements as well. So just be aware that you will have to provide evidence of that. And again, do keep in close touch with the Carers Allowance Unit if you are wanting to go down that route. You could also factor in expenses that are to do with what you do. For example, if you're a hairdresser, you wear black. If you're a plumber, you've got to have a van. If you have expenses that are to do with your business, you can take certain of those off your earnings. Again, ask the Carers Allowance Unit what evidence they need of that. Also, childcare costs. You can actually factor in what you pay in terms of childcare for your child with additional needs and your other children as well, up to 16. So if you pay childcare costs to enable you to go out to work, you can factor in those costs as well to bring your earnings down. It doesn't have to be an Ofsted registered childcare or anything like that. It can be, another person looking after your child. But again, keeping close contact with the Carers Allowance Unit just to make sure that they've got the documentary evidence to prove that that money is going on childcare and should be knocked off your earnings. Okay, that's the Carers Allowance form. Not half as unwieldy as the DLA form, much easier to fill in. You can fill it in online as well. It will be backdated to the date you started getting DLA, as long as you actually apply for it within 3 months of getting the DLA. I think my advice about all benefits is try not to delay with applying for them, because all benefits have got different time allowances where they'll allow you to claim it. If you leave it longer than that 3 months, if you don't claim carers allowance for 7 months and you realised, you could have got it immediately when your child was getting DLA, you might have missed out on 7 months worth of carers allowance. Okay, so just be aware of that. My advice with benefits as well is if you get a disability benefit or you get carers allowance, tell all the other people that give you the benefits that you're now getting these benefits. For example, universal credit. If you get universal credit, put it on your journal that you now get carers allowance or DLA, the date you were awarded it from. Okay, if you get tax credits, child tax credits, working tax credits, what have you, then make sure you tell them, because what happens is you'll get more added on to all these means tested benefits. But do it as soon as possible, because it may well be that they won't backdate. If you should have rung them 6 months ago to tell them you got DLA, you didn't, they won't backdate. They'll only backdate it 28 days. You're missing out on sums of money. Okay, so that's the carers allowance form. And like I said earlier, your carers centre, always get in touch with your carers centre and ask them if they can help you complete the carers allowance form. They will certainly do that form, and they'll have a lot of information on it as well. Universal credit is the benefit that has replaced all those benefits on the top line of this slide. So it's replaced income support, income-related employment support allowance, both types of tax credits and housing benefit. So if you don't get those benefits now, you won't be able to claim them. You will have to claim universal credit. And this is the benefit that is for people who are either on a very low, or either on a low income or no income. So you can be getting universal credit if you're working, but your income is low. It's a single monthly payment. and it's claimed online, and usually a 5-week wait for your first payment, although they will give you an advance. Okay. If you're currently getting any of those benefits at the moment and you're unsure whether to claim universal credit, my advice would be to get advice from our helpline, and they may then put you through to one of the welfare benefit specialists, because it's not always a good idea. Some people are finding they're getting child tax credits, they put in a claim for universal credit, they actually find they're not eligible because they had too many savings and they've lost their child tax credits. You can't go back on the old benefits. It's a one-way system with universal credit. So because of that, get advice if you or somebody you know is thinking of claiming universal credit. Okay, everybody eventually, if you are getting income support or child tax credits, working tax credit, etc., everybody eventually is going to be put on universal credit. You won't get a choice in the matter. It was supposed to be 2023, everybody was on it, but because of COVID, this has obviously been delayed. When you are put on universal credit, if you are a bit worse off, they will make sure that you're not worse off. They will give you a payment to make sure you're on exactly the same amount of money every month. But what's happened is, as the years go by and things get more expensive, your universal credit won't go up in line with that. That will just sort of stay as it is. Your benefits will go up a bit each year, but it won't be as much as the cost of living. So people under universal credit are eventually probably going to be worse off than they were under the old system. The biggest concern about universal credit is it's not so generous as child tax credits. At the moment, if you get child tax credits because you have a low income, if you get DLA, you will get more child tax credits. They will add more money on to your child tax credits. They will add £60 a week onto your child tax credits, or £80 if your child is on the top rate of care of DLA. So that means you're automatically £300 better off by getting DLA. Okay, that much has been added onto your child tax credits. Unfortunately, under universal credit, they don't add as much on. Instead of adding £60 a week on, they will only add on 20. So immediately families are £40 a week worse off under universal credit if they've got a child on DLA within the family. So that's £160 a month, times that by 52 weeks of the year. And if you've got 2 disabled children or 3, that's a lot of money worse off under the universal credit system. So that's the reason that Contact is banging on to highlight this and how it's difficult for families. If your child gets the high rate of care, you won't be any worse off. You'll still get, you know, £80 a week added on to what you get every month. That's what the government keeps on about, wanting to try and focus on those most in need. Okay, so they're giving more to children who are on the, you know, the high rate, who've got the severe problems, than children who haven't got quite such severe problems. Okay, the only other thing I think is worth mentioning at this stage is if you've got a partner and you both care full time for your child with additional needs, unfortunately, one of those people might be asked to look for work and the other person is deemed the carer. Under the old system, that didn't need to happen. But under the new system, if you're in a couple, only one person in that couple or partnership can be a carer. The other person will probably be asked to look for work unless they've got a disability themselves and are exempt from work. It's a lot of information to take in, but I think with anybody who's thinking about applying for universal credit, ring our helpline, get a bit of advice. Okay. The good thing about universal credit is with carers allowance, if you earned over £128 a week, remember I said you can't claim it, you won't receive it, you won't be eligible for it. Under universal credit, if you earn over that amount, because you see it's for people in low incomes, not just no incomes. So if you earn £140 a week, they might still give you money for being a carer, whereas under the old system you wouldn't. Okay, they might still give you something called a carer's element added onto your universal credit, even though you're actually working and earning over £128 a week. So that's a positive. And you can see here where the government is coming from. They're really trying to get people to go out to work, including carers, by making things easier for them. Under the old system, you had to be working at least 16 hours a week to get help with childcare. If you didn't work that amount, you wouldn't get any help with your childcare costs. But you don't have to work. You can work any number of hours under universal credit, and they'll still give you money with childcare costs, and they'll give you more money towards your childcare costs under universal credit. Again, all the emphasis is on making people go out to work and make it possible for them to go out to work. Not so much an issue that often it's very difficult to get childcare for your child with additional needs. Anybody suitable, qualified, who's prepared to deal with their difficulties, they haven't really taken that on board. And it's very expensive to get, nurseries that are more set up to deal with children with, with special needs. So unfortunately, the government hasn't taken that on board at all. And if you do get carers allowance, you're not expected to go and look for work at all. Okay, so you're deemed as a carer, so you're not expected to apply for work or be seen to look for work, which most people are under universal credit. Just to go on to the last couple of slides, help with council tax. There are 3 ways you can get your council tax bill reduced. First of all, the disability reduction scheme. Well, I'll come to that last. The second one is the local support scheme. Every local authority has got its own scheme, depending on where you live in the country, and every scheme is different, depends on your local authority. It's for families that are struggling to pay the council tax because they've got a low income or financial difficulties. All I would say is ring your local authority, or go on a live chat, email them, whatever, explain your difficulties, say financially stressed, stretched, made redundant, have to give my job, my child's just been diagnosed with this, I can't find childcare. So we are struggling with our council tax, we can't pay our bills. What can you, as my local authority, do to help me? Ask about that. Okay. The council tax discount, the bottom one, that is where you get a 25% discount, a quarter discount on your council tax bill if there's only one adult living in your property. If there are other adults, they might be excluded on certain grounds. If you're living with somebody who's got over 18, but they've got a severe mental impairment, for example, an elderly parent with dementia, or your 18-year-old who's got learning difficulties, they would actually be not included as an adult living in your house. So although you are a single parent, your older child has turned 18, because he or she has got a learning difficulty, the local authority won't take them into account. They will actually discount them for council tax purposes. They will only see you as the one adult living in that house. You'll still get your 25% discount. The top one, the disability reduction, is if your house has been adapted for your child in any way, if you've had a ground floor shower room or kitchen, probably not in your cases, built for your child with additional needs, then you might qualify for reduction in your council tax. You would drop down a council tax band. Or if your house has been adapted for wheelchair use, or it's just a wheelchair has to be used indoors, that might qualify. Or if you've got a room set aside that you use for your child with additional needs, it could be for storage. For example, loads of therapy equipment, balls, walking frames, rollators, bars, anything therapy-wise, or storage of, special feeds, or storage of continence products. If that room is out of bounds, taken totally up by my child's needs for storage purposes or what have you, then they would discount that room. You might drop down a council tax band. Or if you set aside a room for your child, for example, as their sensory room, it's their room where they go to withdraw, to have time out, to calm down, where their siblings can't go and move anything, where they can have their sensory stuff on, their lights, their smells, what have you, helps them to calm down, to stop them reaching boiling point. It could be argued that you've actually set that aside for your child's needs. The way to apply for that and any of these reductions and exemptions and what have you is to look at your local authority website, go on the disability reduction bit, and you'll see then the form to print off to apply for it. They will send somebody around to check that what you're saying is correct and that you have got that room as a sensory room, or a wheelchair is being used indoors, or you've got storage, everything's being stored in that room for your child. So they will send somebody around, so just be aware of that. But it just means you drop down a band for your council tax, so you're paying less money every month. And the other benefits you might get help with utility bills. If you've got somebody disabled in the family, always ring your gas, electricity, water, whoever provides them, and say that. Ask if there's any special tariff you can be put on, or if there's any special schemes, particularly for households in your circumstances. Very often, these companies have got schemes which they don't broadcast or advertise easily, where they might actually give you assistance. They might actually pay off a debt. They might actually reduce your bills. They might do different things just to take the financial pressure off you. And a lot of them have got their own trusts that you can apply to get one-off payments, for example, to get rid of a debt or bring a bill down, or for a household piece of equipment like a new fridge, freezer, or what have you. So say what you're struggling with. Ask if there's any help for your family, because you've got somebody disabled in the family. You have to use a lot of electricity. Your water bills are very high, and tell them that when you speak to them. Always has to be put on their priority services register as well. You'll get special treatment with power cuts, floods, what have you. The blue badge you'll automatically get if your child gets high rate mobility of DLA. You still have to apply for it on the gov.uk website, but you will automatically be eligible for it. It is free, but you do have to apply for it. You might be eligible for a blue badge, which makes parking easier and cheaper off your local authority if going out and about with your child is difficult because of psychological difficulties, mental health, anxiety. Not always easy to get, but the way to apply for it is to go on your local authority website, just put blue badge in, and it will take you to the form. Complete the form. You will get to a stage of where they ask for information, where it will say, do you get higher mobility? You'll tick no, and it'll say you can't get it. But then if you look more carefully, there will be a box somewhere on that page that says other reasons for applying for a blue badge. That's what you tick on. It takes you on with the process. You then can put details in about your child's difficulties with going out. Local authorities vary with how easily they give out these blue badges. Some don't ask for any proof, evidence. Some of them ask for lots. They'll want a psychologist report, an OT report to prove the extent of the difficulties with taking your child out. But if they turn you down, appeal, go through the complaints procedure, get more evidence, because that will make it easier. Blue badge parking right outside where you've got to get to, no problems, no meltdowns. And if things go pear-shaped, you're quickly back in the car, back home, safe. So a blue badge can be a real help. Road tax exemption you get if your child receives high rate of mobility of DLA. Again, you have to apply for it. The CEA card is the Cinema Exhibitor Association card, and you will be given all these links. Cinema Exhibitor Association card, which again you have to apply for. I think it costs about £10 a year. You'll get it if your child is on DLA. It just means that you can take them into the cinema and one person goes free, you the carer go free. If your child loves the cinema, if you've got relaxed viewings in your area, it may be that you can go on a Saturday, just a bit more time to do something. The Max card is a discount card for parent carers. Not every local authority operates the scheme. Your carer centre would be the best place to find out whether it does. And if they don't have a Max scheme, your carer centre probably would know other discount schemes that they may operate wherever you're based. Always when you go out, if your child has got DLA, if you're going to a theme park or any attraction, ring them in advance and tell them your child is on DLA. Say you've got proof, you've got your award letter, put that in a bit of laminate or take a photo or what have you. Says that any discounts, exemptions, anything you can make life easier for us. You know, can we skip the queues? Can we go to the front of the queue? Can we go on rides twice? Always ask in advance. And then, you know, hopefully they'll be able to organise something if they can do things. Never be afraid to ask. Rail travel, the disabled rail card is for if somebody gets DLA, if they're disabled or got additional needs, it just entitles a companion and you to go get a third off your rail travel usually off-peak times. So again, if your child loves trains, it might just bring the cost of the journeys down if you want to go backwards and forwards on the same journey for a couple of hours. So that's the disabled rail card. And lastly, the family fund. I hope people have heard about it. Few people probably won't. This is a large charity that gives grants out to children with fairly significant difficulties. So if your child has got just mild difficulties and what have you, you might not meet the criteria. They used to give grants out to everybody, but I think they have tightened their criteria up over the years as they come by. And they do prioritise families on means-tested benefits like universal credit or tax credits or whatever. So if you are earning, then you probably won't be able to get help, but they might consider a one-off discretionary grant if you're going through a difficult time because of furlough, redundancy, which is now sounding a bit distant now, but if you've had a difficult year, financially strapped, get in touch with them and ask if they might be able to help you. Very simple application form, but do send evidence in with it because they might turn you down if they think the problems aren't great enough. They do have specific criteria and you've got to tick about 4 or 5 boxes to meet the criteria, but send evidence in of your child's difficulties at school and other reports from professionals that you've got involved. But they give grants out up to about £400 or £500 once a year, although that changes. They might say next year it's every other year or every 3 years. They change their criteria all the time. And they give grants for anything that improves the life of the child, the family, or holidays as well. So it could be that they give a grant out to buy a pet, to buy a laptop, an iPad, sensory equipment, clothing, white goods, anything. And if it's your first application, they ask you to prioritise. They might give 2 or 3 grants. Okay, so just be aware of that. Also, if you are working or have worked or somebody else in your family is working in a particular job or occupation, just be aware of benevolent funds that might be attached to those areas of work. For example, if somebody's worked with cars, police, a nurse, worked in hospitality, a bar, a cleaner, worked for the local authority, solicitor, accountants, all those jobs and occupations have got benevolent funds attached. Just Google benevolent fund for people that worked in shops, and there will be a fund available. Very often they give grants out to people that have worked in their industries either now or in the past that are struggling financially that might benefit from a one-off grant. So just be aware of those as well. Just Google what might be available. And the last slide is organisations that might help are condition-specific organisations like Down Syndrome Association, Autistic Society, just to give you a couple of examples, can't think of other ones off the top of my head. Your carer centre, I've mentioned time and time again, just be aware of them, very useful to know about. Local authority, some of them might have welfare rights departments that do benefits for people, very difficult to get hold of people and very difficult to know about them. Again, ask your carer centre, they might have links with the welfare rights people or the local authority with social services where they can refer you internally for help with form filling or benefits to do a benefits calculation. Be aware of your CAB, Citizens Advice Bureau. Always be aware of our contact helpline. Okay, ring that if you just don't know where to start in finding information out about something. We've got loads of booklets and fact sheets. We have got one on money matters, have got one on DLA, have got one on help with your council tax and how to get your heating bills down and what have you. And there's also the Cerebra Guide I mentioned earlier, is fantastic with DLA. So do look at that as well. And they do give a lot of information on sleep as well, which contact do as well, but look at both organisations, info on DLA and sleep. And the last thing I just want to mention, again, is the listening ear service that Contact operates. This is where you can have a one-to-one call back with one of us, family support advisors, consultants, whatever you'd like to call us, at a time that suits you. We've got appointments morning, afternoon and evening, 5 days a week. Book yourself into a slot, okay, and you'll get a call back at that time. It's there for everything, emotional support, as well as, you know, if you've got specific queries about things that you're struggling with and you don't know which way to go with your child's education, nursery, benefits, social services, getting access to respite, can be about anything. So do just be aware of that service as well.